Well, for more on the ramifications of Cruz dropping out, let's speak to Peter Mathews. He's a professor of political science from Cypress College in California. Good evening to you, Mr. Mathews. So, Donald Trump is a step closer. How can someone who has such offensive comments to Muslims, Latinos, women be so likely to become the Republican nominee for the presidency?
Well, there are several reasons, but one of them is because he's appealing to the Republican Party and the right-wing conservatives and the xenophobes who have been condemning, Muslims and Mexican Americans and immigrants and women. Don't forget women. And yet he appeals to the hardcore group of Republicans that want change. They've lost their jobs. Many of these men, mostly men, who have lost jobs exported to Mexico and China because of free trade. And he comes across and says, I'm against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm against free trade. I want to keep our jobs here. And these people find him appealing, partly because of that, plus the xenophobia. But that's the Republican Party. Now, he also won some independent voters who've lost jobs and seen outsourcing take away their livelihood. So those are some of the reasons. And he is a divide and conquer type leader. It's very, you have to be very careful what happens here, because if he wins in the fall, he will win the nomination, I'm predicting, in the summer in the Republican Party. But if he wins in the fall against Hillary or Bernie, and it's unlikely he'll win against Bernie, but he could win against Hillary Clinton, it's going to be a big problem for the country, especially in foreign policy, because he doesn't know much about foreign policy, believe me.
Absolutely.
And he better get well, let's say if he wins, then it'll be a disaster to some extent.
Well, Professor Mathews, let's just look at that then. So how do you think this is actually being played out internationally? Obviously, this doesn't play well for the American populace if they're so keen on a man like Donald Trump.
Yes, in fact, many foreign leaders and constituents and people living in other countries from the United States are very concerned about what will happen if he comes to the forefront and becomes the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the world that outspends all the other countries, that has nuclear weapons. Will he be glib about his pronouncements and take off and do something really emotional, try to settle the Middle Eastern problem or problem in Syria? What will he do? We don't even know. So we are very concerned about him winning, and many people will work hard to keep him from winning, even if Hillary wins the nomination. And if Bernie wins the nomination, Bernie Sanders, the polls are showing that Bernie will beat Donald Trump by double digits, almost 20%. If Hillary wins the nomination, the polls are showing that she may beat Trump by a few percent. We're not sure. So it's going to be a very interesting race in November, depending on who wins these nominations on the Democratic side. But Trump is certainly be the Republican nominee, in my view.
Absolutely. Well, we'll leave Trump there and talk about the Democrats now. And you mentioned that the polls are showing Sanders to beat Trump. It's fascinating that socialists would beat someone like Donald Trump, a businessman in the United States in 2016.
That's right. These are fascinating and different times we're living in right now. The gap between rich and poor in America has grown to 400 to 1. The CEOs are making 400 times the income of the average worker, whereas in 1980, it was 40 to 1. The middle class has been disappearing. So Sanders' message resonates, and people are not afraid of socialism anymore. They understand, he's explained that it's democratic socialism, sort of like the social democracies of Europe, like Sweden, Denmark, Germany. And Americans have come to understand that. They're not afraid of that anymore. And it isn't remarkable that a few years ago, the word socialism might have been much more difficult to overcome. But not anymore, because Sanders is very clear about his platform. And what he will do with that money by closing corporate loopholes is to bring free tuition to all American students, as they do in Europe. And in fact, he'd bring in a universal health care system that will work for everyone, not just for profit-driven hospitals and insurance companies. So that message is resonating. Plus, we have a problem here with the fact that Trump is a billionaire. I mean, that's something that Bernie Sanders has been using. He's saying this American government has been captured by billionaires and millionaires. And guess who's the poster child? Donald Trump, who inherited a few million from his father, used that money to become even wealthier, and lost a few businesses before he actually came back on his feet. So there's a lot of vulnerability on his side. And I think Bernie is probably the most solid candidate. He's certainly among the three, Hillary, Bernie, and Donald Trump. Bernie has the greatest favorability rating among the public, and Donald Trump and Hillary have the lowest favorable ratings among the public. They have negative favorability, actually, which is based on trust and those kinds of things. So it's very interesting to see how this dynamic will play out. Absolutely. And I'm pretty excited as a political analyst to keep track of it, and a political science professor. And I've written a book about money in politics, so it's perfectly timely. Dollar democracy, liberty and justice for some, how to reclaim the American dream for all.
Okay, well, Professor Mathews, really good to talk to you. We could keep going all day, but we have to move on, unfortunately. But thanks for joining us on TRT World. Thank you.